Determine the width of the mortise chisel required before starting to complete the mortises. Place one stile in the vise together with a scrap piece of timber underneath to provide support as the joint is being cut. Always make sure that each mortise is positioned centrally in the vise as it is being cut, because this is the strongest point. Working from the end of the bench, place the mortise chisel just inside the marking outlines, indicating the position of the through mortise. Ensuring that the chisel is approximately 90 degrees to the face of the stile, begin to form the mortise. This is normally achieved by striking the chisel firmly several times against the timber, before turning the chisel around and repeating the process along the length of the joint. Use the handle of the chisel to lever the waste material from the mortise. Care should be taken through this stage to prevent levering on the edge of the mortise, as this will cause damage that will be visible when the joint is assembled. Continue to repeat this method of mortising approximately halfway through the thickness of the timber. Once the required depth has been achieved, the timber should be turned over and the process of mortising should be repeated until both mortises meet in the centre of the timber. Once the through mortise has been completed, the haunch can be formed. This is a similar process to the one previously mentioned for the through mortise, only this time the depth is restricted and only formed on the face edge. Indicating the depth of the haunch on the back of the mortise chisel with a pencil line or a piece of masking tape will make this process easier. Continue to check the depth of the haunch with a combination square until the full depth is achieved. This process should be replicated on all 4 joints. Once all the mortises have been formed, the tenons can be cut. Place one rail in the centre of the vise at approximately 45 degrees. Using a tenon saw, begin to cut along the waste edge of the gauge lines on 2 faces of the timber. Turn the rail over and repeat the process on the other side, before placing the timber vertically in the vise to follow the saw cuts down to the shoulder lines. Once the length of the tenon has been cut, the waste material will have to be removed by cutting along the shoulder lines. The full width of the tenon will have to be reduced to form the haunch. This can be simply marked out by transferring the haunch position from the mortise onto the tenon. It's common practice to use the waste material created by forming the haunch on the tenon for the wedges used to hold the joint together. Once all 4 tenons have been cut, the component should be rebaited and assembled to check the fit of each joint. Lightly sand the inner edges of the casement prior to assembly. Use a good quality water-resistant adhesive on all 4 tenons prior to assembling the casement. Place packers between the edges of the casement and the shoes of the sash cramps before applying light pressure to squeeze the joints together. Use a squaring rod to check the casement is square before inserting the wedges either side of the tenon. Remove any excess adhesive with a damp, clean cloth. Secure the casement to the bench through the horns with round head nails to prevent it moving whilst it is being planed and sanded. Use a sanding block to remove all of the arises around the inner edge of the casement. Once both faces of the casement have been cleaned up, the horns and excess material from the wedges can be removed. Plane the parameter of the casement to remove any pencil or machining marks. A slight angle will need to be produced on the bottom edge of the casement to allow it to fit correctly into the frame. Place the completed casement into the traditional window frame to check the margin around its parameter. Any slight adjustments can be made with a bench plane.